Kenya's biggest conversation this Monday. I'm already getting us to Tuesday. Let's get through Monday first, isn't it? And, you know, there have been many things happening. UNGA closed a few weeks ago, and no sooner had that happened, it's likely that the conversation took place at UNGA, whereby one of the Bretton Woods institutions has been approached then to then help Kenya with budget making. Not making, but budget financing, and which is one of the two instances under which you can actually borrow, according to the Constitution of Kenya. Billow Kerrow, who is a political economist, joins us this morning, and we're going to have a conversation around this, that what exactly it does mean when we're talking about this budget financing, adding on to the 11.8 trillion shillings that Kenya already owes. Billow, good morning.
Good morning to you.
How are you doing?
Not bad.
I've already started to throw things at you. That's what it's looking like. But before we get our hands dirty and wade into this water, Dennis is taking us to lower eastern part of the continent.
Yes.
Okay.
To be specific, the Union of the Comoros, an island nation in the Indian Ocean between Madagascar and Mozambique. The capital city is Moroni. You know, someone made a mistake and said Muhoroni. It is not Muhoroni. It is Moroni, And it has a population of around 900,000 people. They speak Swahili with Arabic influence, which is widely spoken. But let's go to the proverb today. You can win a woman with lies, but you cannot feed her with lies. You can win a woman with lies, but you cannot feed her with lies. How would you interpret that?
It is very close to a Somali proverb, which says you can bring a woman on board with lies. Yeah, but you have to keep her with
truth.
With truth.
With truth.
So it's you know, when you are, it's the selling. You have to, you know, you can sell something, but I think later, you know, it will catch up with you.
Yeah. One would say a lot is catching up with us as a republic, but that's a conversation you're getting right into, because when the government was coming into power, one of the things they said is we would not get more debt.
Of course.
Today, we are back with I.
Indeed. 11.8 trillion shillings in debt. That's where Kenya is, looking at public and domestic debt when we put it together. And UNGA closed just at the end of last week, and that was a position for many countries to have conversations. It's not lost on anyone that the headquarters of the United Nations is in New York, and this is the same country where the financing corporations for the globe also are not necessarily in New York, but in the continental US. And so conversations were had by many a country with financing organizations about what is possible for the future. Kenya was one of those countries. And after that is when we hear now that Kenya is having a conversation with the IMF for some financing towards meeting the budget. Again, one of the two cases in which Kenya is allowed to borrow for development and then also making up for budget. What exactly does this mean, Billow, and where does it put Kenya at the moment?
Very well. Let me give some perspective on this thing. First, I think whenever you see the IMF, they come here at the invitation of the government.
Okay.
They don't come if you don't invite them. That means if you are able to manage your resources, your finances, no one bothers with it. It's like any bank. No bank will come to your house if you don't want to borrow. Number two, we had a facility, a huge facility that was signed in 2021 after the COVID, to try and recover after the COVID shock. That facility was huge. It was $2.3 billion, and it was supposed to run for 3 years. And when that facility was left with about 800 million, that would have been accessed early this year. Then, of course, what happened is the Finance Bill 2024 got thrown out, and so the IMF review could not take place.
Yep.
And that was scrapped, and so there was no facility available for the government to try and cover their budget deficit. And this thing is all about the budget deficit. When your expenditure is more than your revenue, it's called a fiscal deficit or budget deficit. In the 10 years of President Uhuru, we had run at 9% budget deficit consistently. And we had raised so many times. I remember that, please, this thing is going to catch up with us. You can't consistently have this budget deficit. You're spending much more than that. Today, as we speak, it is still at 5.8 almost. If you look at the budget that was approved a few months ago, the target was it will be reduced to 4.3. It has always been the target that we'll get it below 4%, so that it can be manageable at least. So that means you will borrow less. The higher that percentage, the more you will borrow. And so that has been the challenge. So what happened is that facility then was scrapped, and now the government is not able to cover its budget deficit, which is growing. Revenues are not increasing. You've seen the KRA has consistently failed to achieve all its targets, and expenditure is increasing. That's another challenge. If expenditure was constant or is getting lower, then the deficit would remain or would be going down. But expenditure is also increasing. The government keeps on. The president visits your home. You want a road. He wants a hospital. They continue pledging this one, and they're expanding. So I think then that is why the IMF is in town, because you invited them. They'll carry out a review. They'll do an audit to see whether you can qualify for a new facility. And traditionally, IMF, like any bank, will give you the facility with conditions. And that's where now the challenges come in, and that's where the Finance Bill 2024 came in.
All right. So what does this portend? And what kind of money are we looking at, essentially, that would come with this? Okay, so budget this year is 3.2 trillion.
Yeah.
In order to meet that, there's taxes, which we know, all right, let's take the last 1 year, coming out of every quarter. And even at this last time, before we saw the budget read, the most that KRA has been able to collect was 2.1 trillion. Right? And if a forecast is taking into place, forecast is giving it 2.8, 2.9, if possible. Are we essentially saying that if the forecast, and let's just play in a land of utopia for a moment, if the forecast is realized, that means that what Kenya is looking for, give or take, to be able to meet the budget is about $500 billion?
No, to be more. If you look at the expenditure, the way government presents its estimates or its budget.
Yes.
It's a bit complicated. There's always that question of transparency around budgets by governments to try and camouflage a lot of things. But the bottom line is that the government's expenditure includes not just expenditure of development and recurrent and those things, but it also includes the debt repayments.
Yes.
When you take all those into account, then you're talking of over 4 trillion, really, at the end of the day, that the government must be able to. So if you are collecting 2.9 and you're going to spend over 4 trillion, you have a deficit of over 1 trillion shillings. So what normally happens is that for the debts, if they're not able to pay, they roll over some of the debts. And so then when they look at the actual amounts that they're going to borrow locally or externally, then they will reduce and say, okay, we're only going to borrow 500, 600. But essentially what they're saying is, what they're not telling you is that there are many other loans that may be due, but which are rolled over, which are carried forward. So the actual deficit is what this is what debts are about. Debt is just accumulation of all those deficits.
You talked about IMF support. Well, obviously, comes with some very tough conditions.
Oh, yes.
So we've seen in the past conditions tied to VAT on fuel, for example. We've seen in the past issues on, subsidies, removal of subsidies and all that. What, in this present moment, do you see as the likely conditions if then we get into taking further loans?
I think the most significant conditions for IMF was increased revenue collection, tax revenues. That has been the key one. And this is why you found in 2021, when this thing was introduced, Uhuru came up with the 8% VAT. And when Ruto came in, thought that's not enough, please, we need more taxes, and they increased it to 16%. And that's why all those taxes in the finance bill came up. So the most fundamental, I think, thing for IMF is always, I want more revenues. because it's all about having the ability to repay your loan. That's IMF's number one condition. If you're not able to collect more taxes, then for heaven's sake, reduce your expenses. That's the next thing. If you're not able to reduce your expenses, and you are not able to raise tax revenues, then they look for other avenues, and these are the ones that we call governance issues. That's when they tell you, sell your assets. Kenya Airways, Kenya Pipeline, Kenya this, Kenya that, sell them. All these things about selling is part of this. They'll tell you we want to, get more levies through fuel levy or introduce other. You have to convince the government that you are. That's why you hear about carbon levy, this levy, that. Every ministry coming up with something. This is all about trying to generate more resources for government. That's if you're not willing to touch your expenditure.
And obviously, they're not willing to touch expenditure. We've seen this in the past. There will be a promise that, look, we will try to reduce how much money we are using in our line ministries. But that could be on paper, but practically you don't see that happening.
Yeah.
And so you see introduction of new levies and new taxes.
Yeah.
And now the conversations of selling off things that ordinarily in the past you would not hear. Kenya Pipeline, for example. So we want to privatize this, we want to privatize that, we want to get into partnership with this. So are we being prepared for, because it seems that's the direction we're heading. Are we being prepared to go into that direction even before they sign any new deals?
The language simplified means if you want to borrow from IMF, tell us how you're going to pay. You must, and that comes from you, it's not from them. You have to tell them, look, I have the family's cabinet there I want to sell. I will sell my bed. I'll do this, I'll do that. You have to tell them. So all these things is part of the things that you're going to put on the table. I'll give you the facility. I'll cover your budget deficit. I'll run a program for you. But how are you going to do it? So I think no doubt that the sale of assets is one of the things, and that's why restructuring. Sometimes they call it restructuring of state corporations. Kenya Airways needs to be restructured and do this or do that, and this is all part of the whatever. But at the end of the day, it's all about we want more revenues to come in to be able to pay.
Billow, you look at the way we are as a country and what we collect vis-a-vis what we spend, expenditure clearly is a problem. Now, here's a question where, because IMF is in town, restructuring, and we have to sell this, we have to sell that, and Kenyans feel and say, we are not part of the conversation. We are not included in this conversation. We remove that. We are taxed. We give it to the government. How it is spent is not commensurate with where we are as a country. How do we fix that gap? What do we do? Because that's what Kenyans want to know. What must Kenyans do to ensure that their assets are not sold and that the government gets to deal with the expenditure crisis that we are seeing?
Very simple. The Constitution has dealt with that through an institution called the Parliament. Me and you are represented there. Government cannot borrow without it being approved by Parliament, by the National Assembly. You must ratify any facility, any loan, any borrowing. They set the limits, they approve the terms. So that's the institution that we are represented there. That's the institution that says, sorry, no borrowing. So what are we going to do? Review the budget. They're the ones who approve the budget also. They can say, sorry, this budget, you can't finance it. You're living beyond your means. So let us reduce the expenditure. Let us scrap some of the ministries. Let us scrap some of the institutions. So that's where the conversation should be. So what if the Parliament is not working? That's your question.
That's the question.
That's why we ended up on the streets in 2024 on the finance bill.
That means our problem clearly is our Parliament, because the Parliament as well seems to be seeing what the executive wants.
Can you and I just get a bit perplexed. I'm just trying to understand, and I think about this Kenyan problem, and it's not just a Kenyan one. And unfortunately, a lot of countries are going through the same thing.
Yeah,
the folks who crunch the numbers, because we know right now the budget process has begun. It started in the first week of September.
Yeah,
and that's going towards budget 2026, 2027.
Yeah.
They, when they are doing this, know that the money that they are budgeting for does not exist. It's not available. Are there countries on this planet that budget with money that the nation actually makes and doesn't take debt into consideration when it is budgeting? Is that possible?
Well, the richest country in the world, the US, has the highest budget deficit in the world,
Okay.
which runs into trillions.
Yeah.
There are countries where, for example, Saudi Arabia, where the oil revenues runs into hundreds of billions. And I know a couple of years ago, I was looking at the numbers. They were having a surplus. Well, you know, the revenue over they were having a surplus of
Yes.
$20-30 billion.
Every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are countries, I mean, where you are, you know, other
If you're
sources.
producing.
You're not relying on tax revenues and so forth. But even those ones, by the way, they look at long term. The next 20-30 years, is that sustainable? And so that's why you see them looking at other alternatives to oil revenues and so forth. So there are a few countries. When our friend Gaddafi was in Libya,
They were in a surplus.
they were
Yeah.
in surplus all the time, and they were
Absolutely.
sending checks to the villages
Exactly.
from the oil revenues. There are a few countries which have been endowed with resources, but I tell you, there are few. There are very few.
However, that the economies don't suffer because we've understood that there are very many countries that operate with debt, but not to the point whereby you're not able to meet the needs of the nation's economy.
Yes, you know, if you are not a powerful, you know, a country like the US, where they even sometimes talk of you know, using some unconventional means of covering their whatever, you need to live within your means, let me tell you. Otherwise, what will hurt you is not the borrowing or the ability to repay, but the conditions that come with that loan. Like in our case, the conditions that come with the loan are going to be very painful for your citizens. That's the challenge on trying to live beyond your means.
This is not novel in terms of an idea. Has been around ever since the Bretton Woods institutions. They may have tweaked their standards when they have tweaked their requirements over time, but more or less they have remained the same. So we are aware of what these requirements are. We are aware of what the conditions are. It's like somebody saying, well, there's danger here. If you walk here, there's a likelihood that you would get stuck. But we walk right into it every single time. And the one question is why. The other part of this question, Billow, is should we budget according to available resources, or do we then budget and then go and look for the resources? Which one makes sense?
You know, a number of countries, by the way, after what happened in the 90s, you remember those structural adjustment programs that Latin American countries, Asian countries that suffered. And many of them have moved away from this kind of facilities from IMF because of the troubles they've had those days. There's still very few countries like ours and others that are really going through these things because of what I would call bad governance. In our case, nothing short of bad governance. You do not have to take Kenya through this if it was not bad governance. And what do I mean by bad governance? Is that the 3-4 trillion shilling budget, how is that money being spent? If that money was spent prudently, if there was integrity in public service and the way the money is being spent, if there was no misplaced priorities, you would not need to borrow this money. What we are collecting, our 3 trillion, would be enough for us to run this country. But when that is not there and there's bad governance, then you end up doing this. And so, yes, to answer your question, as long as we, as Kenyans, continue to accept this kind of governance from one administration to another, then this will continue. And they'll continue digging the hole and we'll continue getting in. And
So is it possible for Kenya, and I'm speaking Kenya specific today, with all of the things that we are going on, look at health, look at education, look at the needs that are there, whether we have CBAs in education, CBAs in health, across board, there's infrastructure that's required, there are so many things that are happening at the same time, so many balls up in the air. And a budget, is it possible
leadership,
to budget according to the resources that are available and survive?
We have discussed a couple of times that issue. You know, it's all about the leadership. You need to tell Kenyans, let's have a convention. We remember last year, 2023, I suggested here and even to NARCO, let's have a convention on the economy. Let people come together and discuss, what do we do? This is our situation. This is our debt. Should we defer some of the developments that everybody wants? Should we defer some of the, the programs that we want to do? Why must you try and do everything at once? For example, one of the things I have raised often is that for every policy that a government brings, please look at it from the cost of living impact. And the impact on the taxes and so forth on the citizens. You don't have to everything now. So why is it difficult for the leadership to tell Kenyans, look, gentlemen, this is our situation. Sorry, but we are not able to carry out ABCD. We are going to defy it. That way, yes, you can go into, but where that is not available, and where we look at political expediency, always, then I'm telling you, we are going to get into this situation. And that seems to be our challenge in Kenya. It's all about political expediency. The moment you come in, you are planning about political survival. And so then some of these other, the rationality of all these things then come into question.
Can Kenyans today wake up and tell the government they put in power that we demand to have this conversation, regardless of what you decide as an executive, that because we find ourselves in this predicament because of the wastage, the corruption, and political expediency that you're talking about, is it possible for Kenyans to say, fine, we've given you an opportunity to do what it is you wanted to do, you failed? As a people, knowing that Parliament has failed us as well, is it possible for us to say, even the debt we're not paying? And what would that mean?
If you don't pay the debt, the buck will stop with the country. So then the challenges would continue to mount on the country. I think what is important is to hold the leadership to account. That's why it's better to call for that meeting. And if you want to call a meeting, you remember last year when Raila said, let's have this meeting, and others said, no. So whenever we want to do something, the political aspect comes in. Maybe if we call that meeting, these guys will try to whitewash their whatever story and they'll get away with it. So the other group doesn't want it. So, but at the end of the day, if you say we don't want, as Kenyans, I am not paying this. By the way, the way the IMF and World Bank works, they normally don't like conversations with Parliament. That's not their tradition. No. They prefer working with the executive because they believe the relationship between the Parliament and the executive, that's not their matter. That's internal. Parliament has approved the budget. They have mandated the executive. I want to deal with the executive. That's normally their whatever. So if you try to getting as people or whatever, they simply say, fine, okay, you can't pay our bill, our loans, fine. They'll simply blacklist you, and then you get into trouble from many other quarters.
But this is a commercial entity. Let's be honest. That when the Bretton Woods institution in New Jersey in the 40s essentially came out, this was building Western Europe. That's what they did. After 1945, they built West Germany. They built France. They rebuilt Great Britain. They put money, but they were looking for business. They were looking for commercial activity to grow the money that they had.
Of course.
That is how they came up as an entity. And the surplus is where they said, then the way we built Western Europe, we can also build other entities around the world. That is how the fund and the bank came to be. So they're not in it for camaraderie or the brotherhood. It's not kumbaya moments all over the world. They're there for the bottom line. They want to make money. So even when we say that they don't invite anybody, we come to them. Is it not possible for people to say, well, we don't need to deal with this IMF money?
That's what I said. A few countries in Asia after that, the 90s crisis, have said we don't want to deal. Like Malaysia, they've been avoiding dealing with IMF for quite a while. So you can. It's up to you. If you simply don't want it, they don't. But it has also been used, IMF, for political purposes. You know that very well. So if you are in good books with Washington, you get looked after by IMF in a better way. So some of the pain that accompanies their facilities would not be there. So sometimes there's a political aspect of it that has been used quite often. But let me tell you, the bottom line is Kenya. It's not about the bank. If you don't have a budget deficit, you don't need IMF. Yeah, and we saw it. I mean, like during the time when we had very little appetite for borrowing in some of the second term of Kibaki, we didn't quite have a serious problem with that. But then when COVID came in, for example, in the second term of Uhuru, and the economy, the taxes were reduced and the economy was in chaos, and so they had to, they went back to IMF and said, look, we have to recover from COVID effects. So sometimes, but for us, generally, it has been because of the governance issues, because of expenditures, money being wasted. That's where the issue of Kenya is, not lack of revenue.
Okay, so
we keep saying it's not lack of revenue. We collect more taxes than everybody else in this region.
And it's possible to do that. Let's look at some numbers below. That Kenya currently owes the IMF. This is from monies that have been taken before. Kenya currently owes the IMF $4.14 billion US. Okay, that's what the number looks like now. Before you even add this new whatever the case may be. So from what it looks like to me, that Kenya could be in this state where it is forever subservient to the IMF because of the kind of money that it owes. So it is very comfortable for you to go back and say, okay, top me up just a little bit. I'll just keep paying in what I've paid. So Kenya will be in a constant state of repaying to the IMF, number one, while still taking more. Is it possible for Kenya then to be independent of this, number one? And can Kenya operate without this borrowing, meeting budget deficit, development programs, etc., without this IMF money? Let's assume that it's been paid.
The one of the things,
in this 400 billion is 1 year's budget.
This year, this government is required to pay close to 1.9 trillion to service debt. Just look at that number, 1.9 trillion. Do you have it? Yes, I have it. Pay. You don't have it? Yes. You borrow from some source to repay part of that debt. You saw it in the $2 billion Eurobond. We didn't have money to pay it, so you borrowed to pay it. So that has been the case when you are in a debt trap in many countries in Africa. We've seen it in Ghana, we've seen it in other countries. So we end up in a situation where IMF essentially is helping you. Actually, this facility now they've come for, this trip they're here now, it's all about how to help Kenya to repay the debts. It's not money for roads or for hospitals. There are loans due. You don't have enough revenues. So they'll help you with these facilities. So that then you can, same way they did the Eurobond. So, we got into a situation where if you don't pay those loans that are due, then you become a defaulter and you get into more consequences. So what governments do then is get into IMF to help them to be able to repay some of those debts, and so that your books you become your debts become sustainable and so forth.
And then that guy who is always sad, Moody, will now tell Kenya that they've dropped you some points on the list.
So that if we didn't have this debt, I agree with you. We can live with it. We can finance everything of ours. But now with this, what you collect 3 million and you pay 1.9. Come,
Billow, I'm just curious. We can't separate politics from this conversation.
No, you can't
at all. So I'm thinking of a situation where IMF comes into town. They're having a conversation with the executive because that's what they do.
Yes.
Obviously they know, they've done the background checks. They know these people are about to get into an election in another year or so. They know the conversations with Kenyans went on social media and wrote emails to IMF, to World Bank. It's not that these people are not jammed their email systems that please do not lend money to our country again. But do they listen? They don't. They still come. So they know the politics around the country. They know the temperatures. They know the protest. They know the finance bill protest. They know all these things. But they're still willing to come in, sit with the executive and have discussions on how much money do you want, but then these are the conditions. And they know if you default, like you said, the consequences are so heavy. Here's a situation I am thinking, are we then saying we are actually in a rabbit hole because whoever borrows now you'll be required to, whether you restructure, repayment, whatever it is that you do, you'll have to do this at least for the next 5, 10, 15, or even 20 years. It's a never-ending cycle. So for them, it doesn't matter who is in power. We're having a conversation with the executive. And then once we pass this, whoever takes over, now this is the politics. I can borrow, if I'm sitting today, I can decide I want to borrow this much. I know in the next 2, 3 years or 5 years, I'm leaving, I'm not there. So I don't care who's going to pay, how you're going to restructure, but whatever I'm paying, I will do whatever I want with it, because whoever is going then to pay the penalties is the incoming government.
You see, in governments, normally, when it comes to these matters, it's simple. You kick the can down the road. Leave it to the next guys. They'll come in, they'll do the same. So if you look at when it was Kibaki, only 1-point-something trillion, it was more, it was something, so everybody just pushes it down. And leave it to be dealt with the next guys who come in. That has been politically, that is the philosophy. But so with all the emails we have written and all the noise, why is IMF coming to the country? I've just mentioned that it's politics. There's the US politics, Western politics. They need to have a grip on your country, one way or the other. If you have no facility with them completely, there aren't many ways in which you can be influenced. And so quite often they would want to have a say in the way your government is run, and your country is run, and you become more vulnerable if you have a facility. And so this is the reason why they can't just say, look, we have been told by Kenyans to get lost and we're not interested. They can't tell the government, sorry, but your people refused. No, this is why these institutions are there today. In 1940s, it was for building Europe. Today, it is for controlling the rest of the world. So where will the control be?
And mostly Africa.
Africa.
Of course.
Because I'm looking at the countries that have defaulted here. And, for example, Zimbabwe, early 2000, fell into arrest with IMF. They lost voting rights. They were cut off from most international financing. The country was so broke. We were told yesterday that in Zimbabwe, part of the tax laws, the actual businesses have shut down. So they are taxing on anticipated profits for your company.
Can you imagine?
So tell us what you anticipate to make. So we're going to tax that. And this is not money that you've already received.
But let me tell you, this country, we don't have a problem of revenue collection. We are very comfortable compared to all these other countries in the region. Our problem is on the expenditure. And this has been our Achilles heel for the last, I don't know how many years. So there's so much wastage in public service. You can't believe it. So what do we do?
So, Billow, we've agreed our problem is wastage. IMF is already here. It's here to do its investigations, its audit, and everything before they give us this facility. This would end up into two things. Higher taxes would end up into restructuring of government, the civil service. That means some people might go home. Also would mean that facilities would be sold off or would be privatized. Just what should Kenyans expect with IMF here?
I would expect more taxes. I would expect more taxes. I do not see how else this government can convince IMF to give us $1 billion. We're going to sell assets. We're going to enhance our accountability in public expenditure. We're going to reduce this or that. IMF has been around and they know that's not quite possible. They have always said we're going to go into austerity and this and that, and it's not worked. So IMF's focus has always been on taxes. Can you generate more revenues to pay us, to pay the debts? And that's why I think they will. The only thing, the difference this time will be they will not be so blunt, and simply put taxes, milk, bread, and they won't come with those things. But they might find a very salient way of doing that you won't feel, but it'll come through the businesses, and so you'll only, So I have no doubt that taxes have to be one of the key things that they will look at.
That means as the budget making process is ongoing right now, perhaps Kenyans need to invest their time into how that process will be, to understand exactly which areas would be taxed and know how they can circumnavigate that. And let me say, Kenyans need to look at particularly the concerns of the businesses, because when the government wants to take more taxes,
They are not going to just put on bread and milk the way they know that one is.
Yeah, that doesn't work anymore.
They'll go to the business. So you manufacture newspapers, and they will start saying, there's print paper that imported will carry this or that excise duty or this and that. So you think it is the business guy who's being punished.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is then the cost of the paper will go up. Yeah, and the cost of the phone will go up. Everything will go up slowly, and that's the way they very insidious way of.
And is the business community as well involved in this budget-making process, or even just lending its advice on the government before going to IMF? No, not before going to IMF. No, in IMF, no. But in the good old days, when the budget was being done, the private sector's voice used to be taken seriously by Treasury. They will take all those things into consideration. Today you see them, they're just making, crying out like me and you on the streets, the same way the civil society and all other groups are making it. So every day they submit, and nobody, you've seen the noise that has come from manufacturing sector, from KEPSA, from everyone. It's the same. So I think they won't listen. IMF does not take that into consideration. IMF simply deals with the executive. They believe the executive has a mandate to rule. Period. So we deal with the executive.
They may not touch the taxes that affect the way they say the common mwananchi, the wanjiko, unga, sukari, maziwa. I'm looking at the dailies today. Close to 116 companies have shut down in the past 4 years. These are major companies. With another 115 warning of imminent closures within the short term from December last year. They're going to shut down. More than 40% of employers under the Federation of Kenya Employers, FKE, had last year indicated they were planning to reduce the number of employees to meet the increasing costs of operating in Kenya. So the cost for business has gone up. So then what we are seeing, it has put an average number, 2,000 members, and you have now a lot of people working for different companies losing their jobs because companies then cannot afford to sustain the wage bill.
You see, the business, one of the fundamental responsibilities of any government is to create that conducive environment for business. That's all you need to do, so that people come and do business in your country and create jobs. That's how revenues are made. That's how jobs are created. The moment your business environment is bad, companies will fold. Because why would I start publishing if I'm going to make losses year on year? Because of the cost of production is very high. The electricity is high, tax is high, this tax is high, that tax is high. So, it's becoming very uncompetitive. Over the years, we have become less competitive. That's why you find companies have gone to Uganda. Companies are now going to Tanzania. But largely, many have gone to Ethiopia, to Egypt, and places where it's more, the business environment is more friendly, the cost of production is lower. So for years, from the time I remember we were in ISPAC, we used to raise this thing more than 20 years ago. The cost of production is crazy in this country, and we're going to lose businesses. Companies will start leaving this country. But nobody will listen. Government executives apparently do not seem to be in sync with what happens in the business world. So when business people try to tell them, this policy is not good, it's going to affect our businesnesses, they say, Anna, you guys are just making billions. You don't want to pay taxes. Everything about government is, you are making money. But business is suffering. And in fact, many more will continue to shut down. Let me be frank with you. We are all struggling. Businesses are struggling to survive in this country because of the high cost of production. And tax is one of the major. I import cooking oil. So for every ton that we import, I say a ton of oil is now about $1,000. Crude palm oil. So I pay, if I'm bringing 1,000 tons, I'm paying $1 million, right?
Yeah.
I pay the government another 33%. That's $330,000 before I get it out of Mombasa port. Yes, I'll pay 10% duty, I pay add 16% VAT, then I pay the IDFs, the RDLs, and all those levies and what have you, 300. So you go here to Ethiopia, there's that zero on government if you're importing edible or cooking oil. Absolutely zero. If you are doing so, in many countries they look at what is essential to the society, to the people. They would not tax those things. So now, forget about the people. So if this company is trying to manufacture that and they find they're not able to sell because the purchasing power gets low, and so all that. So people are going to shut down.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how have other countries, or so let's, we talk about Asian countries, but we also know that these are countries who are operating at some point in a surplus, no matter how. You talk about oil, and I think already of Indonesia, where at some point they said, you know what, we are not selling any of our oil out, and we're not selling to anybody for a period of time. We're going to keep it in the country. We're going to protect our farmers, number one. But then also we need some money to be floating in the economy. They only open those doors later. So we know that at some point they're operating at a surplus, no matter how minimal. So that's why it allows them to say, okay, well, then we don't need to borrow. Some African countries, one in particular, we keep using this example, but Burkina Faso said, you know what, we're not taking any more of this external funding. We're going to sort it out here and make it happen. Do you look at pain in the short term as a payment for the future and say, okay, let's tighten the screws. Let's really go into proper spending. Does it pay off?
You see, when William Ruto came in, you mentioned when you started, he said no borrowing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want us to raise our own taxes and live within our means. Fine. Okay, so the taxes we're paying, but how that taxes will be spent is what will determine whether you can live within your means or not. So if you just deal with the side of taxes only, but you don't deal with the other side of the expenses,
yes,
then the consequences where we are now. We started going back to the borrowing. So it's all about, that's why I keep saying this thing is all about leadership, really. At the end of the day, if the leaders feel the pain that people are feeling, and the pain of the country, we are losing businesses, companies are being shut down, we are losing competitiveness. If the leaders really look at all this, the longer term effects of all these things, they'll say, no, I won't borrow. I don't want all these challenges. They're going to affect the country. Let us try and cut down on our expenditure. Let's the government lean. We've talked about rationalization of government from 2003 when Kibaki came in. And that's why the constitution will reduce the ministries from 30-something to 18. But, people have become, every government becomes more crafty. So in a ministry, you could have departments, then you have PSCs for departments, and so the thing remains. Nothing has changed. Afia House is Afia House before the constitution. After you've devolved 96% of the services, you still Afia House is still there. Yeah. Nothing changes. So we are not really looking at the interest of this country. I'll be frank with you. We are not.
So, Billow, you look at the way the situation is, more taxes will be introduced to Kenyans. That means less power to purchase. More taxes to be introduced on businesses. That means environment for doing business is bad. That means prices of goods and commodities would go up. Just let's look at the converse. If the government today decided to lower taxes on businesses, to allow businesses to more investors to come into the country, for Kenyans to be able to purchase more, are we looking at a situation where the economy will do better? Are we looking at a situation where money circulation will be there and that the government itself would be able to collect more? Are we therefore saying what the government is doing by increasing more taxes is essentially denying them the very tax that they want?
You can take it to the bank. That's exactly what you said is correct. And that's why when Buddy came in, you remember this gentleman called Buddy, the treasury, he says when he came in, one of the things he said is, I believe more taxes discourage investment. And it's better to have less taxes. I'll collect more revenue. It's a fact. Everybody knows. Because if you have less taxes, then your country becomes a better place to do business. And so more businesses will come in, more investors will come in. At the end of the day, what happens is, in the medium term, 3-4 years or so, then once those businesses are established, they employ more people. They'll pay more taxes. That's a fact. Everybody knows that. But when a government, I think he mentioned earlier, the governments are in a hurry. You're looking at election. It's 2 years to go. Nobody's looking at that. They want to see how you can collect money and build a road there and build a road and get the votes back. So it's the political experience that's riding everything. But otherwise, that's the option that everyone knows works best. Yes.
Why don't you just pick it up then?
Yeah. So you remember when this government came in, they went around the country. You guys were doing the counting, how many trips they have flown. And hundreds of business delegations came from everywhere. There was a time we were told from Saudi alone, investors worth, I don't know how many, 13, 14 trillion are in town. They came from UAE, they came from Qatar, all over the world, Europe. And we said, oh my, this country, we're going to have investors. None of those investments, Indonesia, every country was coming to Kenya because they were told that this is the place to do business. We are going to do this, we are going to do that. Where are they? Why is not a single company establishing? Because then when you take the pen and pencil and start doing the numbers, you find, no, this place, the business environment is not conducive. It's not worth it. I'll not make anything. Why do I put the business here?
Because if it were, they would be here.
Yeah. If it's good, let me tell you, you don't even need to go and tell them. They'll see it from everybody knows what's going on. They'll be here. So that's why people are moving to other countries, and that's why the people are shutting down. You can see companies. Why would companies shut down that want to iron business? Because the environment is difficult. You are not making money. You are making losses. Yes, the cost of finance was high. Everything was a challenge.
Okay, it's a tough one.
It is.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but. Let me tell you, there was a time we went to Uhuru, when Uhuru was the president, I was in the Senate, and we went to China, Paris. And I was in that delegation, and we were looking for this SGR loan. And so I remember when in the meeting with the Prime Minister, he told the president, your country, I don't think you guys will do very well, because you talk too much. There's so much politics in your country. I was there. That meeting.
Wow. Okay.
There's so much politics in your country. You can't, because in countries where people really have focused on what exactly they want for their people, for their citizens, then we won't go into these IMFs and all these stories. You'll know what's going on. And people have just spoken last year on the streets and said, we don't want this. And you're calling those guys back today again. And you know what they'll tell you is we want more taxes. So it's like you haven't learned lessons really. So unfortunately, that's the sad thing. And I don't think it's about one president doing that and the other guys who are going to come in would be any different. I think the script is the same more or less from a political team. But last time we thought 2024. There's a bit of a fear now, and things will change. But I think it was only for a short time, and now people are back to the usual mode. So
it's like a slap on Kenyan's face. Whatever you are against, we're actually bringing the fellows here, and you do the meeting here.
Yes, and now we are stronger because it's broad-based. So others have seen our perspective and they've joined our government. So we'll get it. Kenyans will go along. That's the unfortunate. So I think that what this government really needs to focus on is expenditure. They will save us all this trouble. So I don't personally mind if you sell assets. You see that one. Many of the, if you look at almost this 200 plus government state corporations, some of them take quite a bit of money, like Kenya Airways. I mean, we're always pumping in billions every year, and we have spent, and the whole alone we pumped over 150 billion into Kenya Airways. So some of these organizations or state organs or whatever, you might think they are not really necessary. And that report that was done during Uhuru's time by Abdikadir, trying to merge some of them and rationalizing quite a number of them, would have saved quite a bit of money. Yeah. I keep repeating this. When I was a young man in this town, there was a company called Kanatko Taxis. Do you remember?
Kanatko, yeah.
Mercedes-Benz. Yeah. Do you know, before Uhuru came, before Kibaki came, even before Kibaki came, is when the government said, okay, we are now privatizing that thing. We are going to stop it. To date, if you go to the airport, they're still there. They're still running the government number plates, and you don't know why it's still there.
Yeah.
So it's not easy in government. Sometimes you wonder why what's going on. Why? So somebody has an interest and they say no. So tafanya baadaye. Ngoja kidogo.
Well, there was a team called the Dream Team during Daniel Moi's time.
You remember? Yeah.
I'm sure you remember in the 90s when we had economic issues and Kenya was under pressure from IMF and the World Bank to implement at the time structural reforms that are going to affect a lot of government operations. There was obviously cutting corruption, and all this was to just try and stabilize the economy because we were really in a bad place. And you might argue, and at the time, there were even questions around the salaries that were being paid to the people.
Those people, yeah.
How many were they? I'm trying to remember the number.
About 5, 6 of them. Martin O'Dore and Leakey.
Yes.
Quite a number, yeah.
Yes. And they tried coming up with the reports. Were those things ever implemented? Because right now we also seem to have a dream team around the president in the name of advisors. And we're still having a repeat of the same conversation.
If you remember in 2016 when Trump came in, he says, if I go to Washington, I'm going to drain the swamp. Because, the bureaucracy of government and those things. But it's not easy. When you come into power, then the bureaucracy, in government, you'll be confronted with this. You're told, sorry, but this one, you can't do it. If you do it, this will happen.
Well, Elon Musk tried
yes,
to save the US government.
Yes.
He was in the doghouse, literally.
And he couldn't.
Yeah, so that's the challenge. So I know the dream team, very good people, quite a number of professionals who are in the private sector, very successful guys, and they really tried. But the idea was I think what the IMF and World Bank at that time wanted was to improve that image so that they could then give facility. Which I think for the period that they were there, they were able to access some of the things. But I think some of those changes were not sustainable, and some, and so they went with those officers when they left. You remember when things became elephant, they just had to leave, and some of those reforms ended with them. And after that, quite a number of people came in. By the way, IMF has always been, seconding people to Treasury, including the last years. And Uhuru, guy who got arrested, he was also seconded to IMF. These are all IMF guys, and the idea has been that they know what we want and how we work, and so when they get into the government, they should be able to. But when you get in and the bureaucracy and those things, then you find and the politics, you find that things cannot be done the way they ought to be done.
Well, sometimes conversations, blow the lid on some of these things, and it's good that you're in that position whereby you're able to see the reality of things and say, okay, well, something actually absolutely must be done. Billow Kerrow, political economist, has been here with us this morning, and we're looking at what Kenya might be getting into deeper in terms of debt and perhaps where eyes need to be opened. Billow, as always, thank you for being part of this with us this morning.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.